Ah. Yeah. The internet cuts out. That's the end of it. Ah, well. Oh, well. Now it's just me alone in the channel because it kicks everybody out, right? And maybe everybody is sitting in the other one waiting for me to come back. It's not going to happen. Oh, well. Yeah, and I know exactly what happens. They sort of shrug and they go, oh, okay, it's over. Which is completely acceptable. Joe Biden provided Israel a stimulus check to commit war crimes faster than it did prevent Americans from starving to death and the ability to not be evicted during a pandemic. This country is a corporation for war and imperialism. You can't tell me otherwise. Hey, bud. Oh, that's very sweet of you to say. That's everybody has a superpower, and that one is mine. I can get songs cut in people's head pretty easily, and I don't know. Maybe I'll do like a Tuesday, playing of my stuff. I don't know. Or maybe do that like once a month or something. I don't know. I'm glad that it's being well received. I'm glad that you enjoyed it. Yeah, sorry about the cutout. My internet dropped out on me and seems to have killed the stream. So I lost all my viewers. Lost all my viewers. Thanks for popping in though. Thanks for the kind words. I appreciate that. Behind every cop who murders a 13-year-old child, there's a city lawyer working to keep the video secret, a prosecutor lying about it in court, a mayor giving cops more money and weapons, and a professor with a consulting firm deciding which reform will make the most money. Yeah. A little bit different here in Canada. Little bit different. But I think that fundamentally, like, all systems try to protect themselves, right? Israel broke 65 UN resolutions and no one said a word. Iraq broke 2, was bombed, invaded, and destroyed. Let that sink in. UN is a lie. Your identity decides your fate. I mean, it's not UN hypocrisy, but because like, what's the UN supposed to do, right? Like, it's not like the UN ordered them to invade Iraq. It's not like the UN can say what they want. They don't have a military, right? If the United States wants to invade. If the U.S. wants to invade a place, they're going to, and they've made that very clear. They've explicitly stated that that's the case. Like Trudeau to announce $200 million towards a new vaccine plant in Mississauga. Oh, you mean having domestic manufacturing is a good idea? Oh, how shocking! Oh yeah, Major Tyler Greene is just like out of her mind, and a child on top of that. Like, it's really, really crazy. "11 of over 60 children killed in Israeli airstrikes in Gaza over the last week were participating in a program helping them deal with trauma. All of the children between 5 and 15 years old were killed in their homes." Ugh. What a thing, eh? What a thing with Gaza. Just absolutely incredible. My grandpa didn't survive Auschwitz to bomb Gaza. That's crazy to think about, and that's something that like people should. I wonder if anybody's actually done any serious investigation on. Like, how is it that a people who experienced like the fascist concentration camps of Hitler, how is it that they're turning around and they're inflicting the same kind of activity against another people? Like, you would think that the Israeli Jews would be the ones who are. Thought Slime and a few other lefties are raising money for Gaza. Good to hear. Yeah, good to hear. I don't really know how to even go about doing that, honestly. But I'm glad to hear that Thought Slime's. He's got quite a few followers, like 20,000 if I'm not mistaken, and I'm glad to see that he's focusing on and like this. The number one thing that I keep thinking about over and over again, right, is like there will come a moment where like this situation, we're just going to stop talking about it, right? It's going to happen. It always happens. It happens every time. And that like how's that going to look? Like, how are we going to do that? How are we going to keep moving forward? And it's completely going to come because eventually we'll just be so disgusted. Amazing. They set a goal of 10,000, are already at almost 5,000. Amazing. Because social media has done the job on this time, right? Like that, even back in 2014, when the last atrocities happened, the two sides argument was still sort of the predominant force, and that still exists. And I'd love to see some polling on this. Like, I think that's where I'm landing on it. I'd love to see like what are the actual attitudes of people in the country on this particular issue, because like there just needs to come a moment where it doesn't go away, right? Like where like we are participating on the wrong side, no less. Well, and this is the thing, we like to say that they have, but that's because you and I are involved in social media, right? You and I are involved in like internet, YouTube, Twitch style media. And so you and I agree, like on those platforms, that's certainly the case. And like you and I are leftists as well, and so we focus on what we consider to be the right side of the issue, which is that we're a colonizing force destroying the Palestinians, right? But not everybody is doing this. Like, not everybody is involved in social media the way that we are, and still are connected to mainstream media sources for their news, largely. Like, lots of people will watch the interview that Netanyahu gave on Meet the Press, or Face the Nation, rather, and lots of people will walk away from that just believing what Netanyahu said, right? That like, oh, we're defending ourselves, right? Hamas is firing rockets at us. We have the right to defend ourselves. And if Hamas would straighten up and do better, then everything would be better, right? Deflecting and blaming everything on Hamas. And like, I think there's lots of people who will still, and this is why I'm very curious. I hope that some of the big polling organizations are doing polls on this to try and get what is the actual opinion of the populace, because my hope is that the opinion of the populace is starting to turn against the Zionists. And again, I think it's important for us to be specific that we are talking about Zionists here. We're not talking about Jews, right? We're barely talking about Israelis. We're talking about Zionists. We're talking about like a group of people who have a very specific ideology and have kind of co-opted Judaism and Jewish language to put their agenda forward. But their agenda has nothing to do with Judaism. It has nothing to do with being an Israeli or being an Israelite, not in a religious or cultural sense, right? These Zionists, like, they're more closely tied to Nazis than they are to Jews. And I think it's important for us to use that language, but we'll see how it goes, Jeff. We'll see if bibbidi bobbidi boo. What was I saying? We'll see. That's where I'm gonna land. We'll see. Yeah. On this day, 1973, Turkish communist Ibrahim Kaypakkaya was imprisoned, then brutally tortured at the age of 24 by the Turkish state, leading to his death. His political theories was deemed threatening and banned by the Turkish government. That's why I like our communism. You get little pings about this kind of stuff. 1973. Hi, Ruth. I know, the internet went out. My internet just decided to... I think my songs were too powerful. The internet couldn't handle it. I broke the internet. Didn't even have to show my butt about it. This is actually an interesting news piece that talks back about something I was speaking about earlier, like a few months ago, about the Uyghur genocide. Uyghur genocide. New Zealand refuses to accuse China of genocide, right? That the what the Chinese government is doing surrounding the Uyghurs is like a big Western propaganda piece. And here's New Zealand just like refusing to actually do anything. New
Zealand refuses.
I don't think I need to watch. We don't need to watch this. But it's like, and more like the fact that New Zealand is actually releasing a statement refusing to accuse genocide is, I mean, it's interesting. It's interesting. I work for a living. What do you do? I don't work. I'm your boss. I gamble with the money you make for me. What? Don't I get a say in this? Not without a union. Okay, I'll form a union. You're fired. You can't fire me for forming a union. That's illegal. I'd rather face a fine than a union. Yep. Oh, yeah. If they raise the subway fare one more time, I'm going to explode. I'm making $9 an hour. I walk home 3 hours from work every day to save that $2.50 because that's a half gallon of milk for me and my daughter. And every time they raise the fare, they have a hearing, but they aren't hearing anything. It's a joke. If you go through one of these hearings, every single person stands up and says, "Don't raise the fare," then they raise it anyway. Oh man, it burns me up. We need the money, they say. America is hurting. That's bullshit. If I see one more TV program bragging about multi-million-dollar homes, I'm going to scream. How about a fucking TV program that shows me there is anywhere in the city I can afford to live anymore? I'm sorry, but it's burning me up. Yeah, tax these people. Tax the rich. Like, they'll move away. Okay, we'll pack their bags. Like, I don't get why that's not always been the common phrase. Like, we'll raise taxes on the wealthy. Oh, but they'll move away. Okay, we'll pack their bags. Like, our society is better off without them. Like, do you honestly think that our society would be worse if the Kardashians were not a part of it? Do you honestly think that our society would be worse if Jeff Bezos was gone? Like, it's just this presumption that the capitalists are necessary, right? That's what's so dangerous about that assumption, right? That the capitalists rely on the general assumption that they are necessary, right? But they're not. They're completely unnecessary. They don't matter. They are a parasite. They are, and in fact, not only do they not matter, they are a net negative on us. That they reduce our productivity as a nation. That they make things harder to achieve. They don't facilitate anything, right? And if the capitalists were suddenly gone, we would be better off for it. So when they say, like, oh, if you do that, we'll just leave, well, I'll pack your bags. Get the fuck out of here. Glad to see you go. I sat in on a union negotiation once. Shit show. Zero passion. Yeah, I mean, it's largely because, like, over the neoliberal period, and this started to happen throughout the 70s, the unions just got co-opted by the capitalists, right? That the that the union, like as long as the union leadership is sort of allowed to live a decent life, and this is again like another reason why it's so dangerous to have even a single billionaire in your society. Like, people will turn on their constituents, like a politician or a union leader will turn on their constituents for a very small amount of money. Like, it doesn't take a lot of money to suddenly, like, if you go to a politician and you say, hey, I'll give you $200,000, or I'll ensure you have like a cushy corporate job forever after you leave office, right? Just do what I want. And if you have like $1 billion, that's nothing to you. That's peanuts. That's you can do that for sure. And so it's actually really easy for capitalists to do to co-opt union leadership. All they have to do is just give a small token of power that puts them ever so slightly ahead of everybody else. And just say, just keep voting for me. Just keep voting on my side, right? Smokey is feckless. He's on the sunshine list. I don't really know who Smokey is, but I assume you are correct. The Mormon Church made a 900% return on GME. Forget the moon. GME is headed for the stars. Yeah, Wall Street bets. They keep calling that GME is going to the stars. I have 2 shares of GME, so I hope it does go to the stars. I hope it just blows up. We'll see. Oh, Steven Donziger. This is a really interesting story that Chapo Trap House did a interview with this guy yesterday. I literally I listened to it while getting groceries today, and the nuts and bolts. I don't know that much about the story, but there is a lot of legal precedent and scary legal things happening to Steven Donziger as he fights Chevron, who has done all kinds of like atrocities and war crimes throughout Ecuador. And as he's fighting them, it's very obvious that like Chevron has bought judges and Chevron is working against judges. If you want to know more about this, I highly recommend listening to the interview that he gave with Chapo Trap House. They did a really, really good job. And he is a human rights lawyer who is fighting in the American legal system such that it exists. And there's all kinds of crazy stuff that's happened to this guy. So I wish I knew more about it to tell you the story more accurately, but I don't, so I won't even try. Long working hours are leading to a rise in premature deaths, the WHO says. Yeah. And like and another aspect of that is like, it used to be that you would have like one person working full time, and then they would have a partner who either didn't work at all or who maybe worked part time. Sorry, one person working full time and another person working like maybe part time. But now everybody needs to work full time, right? And that destroys relationships. It destroys any connection that you can have with anybody, right? Everybody's exhausted. Everybody's like working long hours, and of course it's raising to a rise in premature deaths. The amount of stress, the amount of absurdity that goes into it. We're not living. Like, this isn't living. Like, our society isn't encouraging people to live a life. Like, we're just cogs in this death machine that bombs Gaza, right? That seems to be the end result of it all. That's why politicians and judges need term limits, because people get comfy with the big salary, forget to represent the people, and only care about holding on to power. Smokey is the president of the OPSEU, yeah. And I don't know, I'm of 2 minds on term limits, honestly. I just think that, like, there need to be caps. Straight up. There just need to be caps. And I'm not talking about, like, caps on union salaries. I'm talking about caps on, like, capitalist earnings. That, like, if a citizen only was able to make $1 million annually, right? Well, they couldn't turn around and bribe a union boss. Like, maybe they could, but it would cost everything. It would cost them lots of money, like a large share of their own personal wealth to do. And so they're not going to do that. Whereas, like, right now, if you have $1 billion, bribing these guys is easy. You don't. It's pocket change. It's a rounding error. You just miss it. You don't even miss it, right? I feel sad that my grandbaby isn't with her mom till she hits kindergarten because they both have to work. Yeah. Like, it's like I only have a dog, right? I only have a dog, and I feel very guilty about how little time, or I did anyway, about how little time I was able to spend even with him. And that's not even a baby who I need to like raise and like put, energy in. Like, it's just a dog. And like, you say bye, and every day they're like, "Where are you going?" And I'm like, "If only you knew, bud. Like, if only you knew." Like, the stupidity of this idea that we're leaving our friends and families and our loved ones so that we can all make lattes for each other. Like, it's so fucking stupid. Like, the system is so dumb. Why do passive investors frequently say past performance does not guarantee future results? But they also say, oh, this gets really specific into investing. I don't want to bother with that here. 56% of workers feel more empowered to start a union when they learn about their basic labor rights under the law. Yeah, which is why capitalism keeps us illiterate. And we don't learn about our basic labor rights under the law in high school, where we should, right? Like, I have big opinions about our education system, and this is one of them. Like, we are not taught, like, our basic rights. Like, we're taught, like, we're taught, like, Shakespeare books, like Shakespearean plays, which we're trained to hate, and we'll read, like, Jane Eyre 3 times, or like a Thomas Hardy novel or something. But no one at any moment takes any time and says, hey, you have rights under the law. Here they are. This is what they are. Here's a book that contains them that you can refer to always and have, right? That doesn't exist. And it doesn't exist for obvious reasons, right? Like, our education system isn't built to inform citizens about how to be citizens in a system. It trains us to be workers, and that's it. Like, when we read Dickens, for example, like in high school, to the degree that we did read Dickens, like, the conversation was never about, like, this is what capitalism will do to you, right? Like, it never was about, this is what the capitalist structure is, this is what capitalism is. It was always just like, Dickens was a popular author, here's some of his stuff. Like, you never went into the, like, genuine commentary about what it is. Have you ever looked into the Sunshine List? They show you every public servant earning more than 100K. Yeah, I know about the Sunshine List. Yeah. And I mean, there is, like, $100,000 to me is such, like, fine. So you're making 100K. Okay. Like, good for you. I genuinely think that the number is so low that it's not even worth it. It's like such a kind of conservative thing to be like, a public servant earning $100,000. Waste. Jeff Bezos made $100 billion this year. That's fine. He's an entrepreneur. There was an energized left bloc at the 2021 convention of Canada's New Democratic Party. Sven Robinson, a veteran leader of the NDP's left wing, spoke to Jacobin about the role of NDP members can play in challenging the party's centrist timidity and popularizing socialist ideas. Yeah. Socialist Action, the organization that I'm a part of, is part of this, for sure. They are constantly attempting to get their own people elected, and they're constantly attempting to push people, and also constantly keeping the party honest within its own rules. Like, that's something, right? That, like, the power structure of the NDP are not interested in being challenged, and they're going to do what every politician are doing. That, like every politician is going to attempt to alter or change or thwart or subvert the rules for their own benefit. Like, that's just such a natural kind of thing. And so organizations like Fight Back, like Socialist Action, I feel like I've seen stuff about Fight Back. Jeff, does Fight Back has a website? Yeah? I'm sure of it. Fight back social organizing. Oh, are they part of Marxist.ca? Because Marxist.ca is something I also see a lot of. Canadian Marxist. Yeah. And like, I see Marxist.ca at a lot of the rallies that I go to as well. Maybe Socialist Action and Fight Back. I'm not that central in that organization generally. I just support and refer. I'm more of a recruiter. I think that's sort of what my position is becoming, more of a recruiter. Getting people aware that these organizations exist generally. And like, so these organizations find themselves in the NDP, Socialist Action, Fight Back Marxists, right? Like, they find themselves in the NDP, and they are the ones that are pushing the NDP to the left and forcing Jagmeet Singh to actually adopt positions that I don't think he would otherwise adopt. Like, I actually don't think that Jagmeet Singh thinks the basic income is a good idea. Like, I don't think he generally supports that idea, right? He certainly, if he does, he's very quiet about it. And yet the NDP is steadily adopting that share the poverty is a classic anti-socialist mantra. Yeah. Well, and it's getting to be like ridiculous now. Like, you start seeing some of the stuff that's coming out of PragerU, which is like a neoliberal capitalist propaganda outlet, and and like, they don't know, or at least they're misinforming people about what socialism actually is. And like, they'll put these, and as we go through my own feed, I'm sure we'll run into it. I see it all the time because it's so absurd. They'll literally like present capitalism and then and tell you why it's bad, and then be like, and that's why socialism's bad. And you're like, but that's literally, like, that's literally capitalism you've just shown us. It's literally a capitalist system that's supported by capitalists. You just called it socialism. And because Americans are so heavily propagandized and so illiterate about what's going on, you can get away with this. That's how you get away with, like, there's this new meme that I keep seeing where people are saying that fascism and Marxism are the same, right? Like, to like, and that's like so incorrect to such an embarrassing degree that at first I was just like kind of pacha about it, but now I take that very seriously. I'm just like, oh, there are people walking around who genuinely think that Marxism and fascism are the same thing, and they're not being flippant or attempting to just be a troll about it. They think that that's the truth, and like, it's so easy to debunk. You literally just show them the Adolf Hitler quote where he's talking about destroying Marxists and how dangerous Marxists are, and you're like, dude, like, it's embarrassing, but it's scary at the same time, because like, people who think that Marxists and Nazis are the same, what? Like, holy shit. I love these kinds of things. How the CIA views China. There are people doing lots of great independent work in the world, man. Like, China used stolen data to expose CIA operatives in Africa and Europe. Beijing ransacked data as U.S. sources went dark in China. Tech giants are giving China a vital edge in espionage. And then there's always some kind of commentary. The mass level of corruption in early 2000s China greatly assisted CIA infiltration, and Xi's anti-corruption campaign has been a serious obstacle for the CIA. Yeah, it's absolutely the truth. So something like this probably won't go too deep. Like, look how much this is. This is so fucking dense. I probably won't go too deep into that. The CPC exercises a large amount of control over its private enterprises to a degree that threatens CIA espionage, right? Like, the CIA is having a tough time messing with China. Good. The CIA is a terrorist organization. Well, and memes are propaganda, right? Whether you like it or not. Like, and let's be really clear about something. Like, communists and leftists need to use propaganda as well. That propaganda is an important part of the fight. And in many ways, like, art and music and all of this is part of that propaganda. Like, you are creating a narrative, right? And the reality is that humans just don't have time. Like, they don't have time to go through, like, these kinds of documents. Like, they're not going to do that. They're not going to take the time to do a big research project when they come home from getting their ass kicked from capitalism, right? They're going to sit on a couch and watch a TV show for a little bit and then go to sleep. Maybe smoke some weed or drink some beer, right? That's what they're going to do. And so you need to create memes and propaganda and art and things like this to be able to drop it in so that somebody can maybe, like, have a ping, right? And here in Canada, like, this is what I keep trying to tell people whenever I encounter people who are kind of, they look at the polls and are kind of, like, lamenting them because the Liberals are striking into majority territory with the polls. The Conservatives still have, like, 30% support, and the NDP are kind of waning. But I'm like, yeah, dude, but, like, those opinions are while they are the opinions of the populace now, those opinions are only the informed opinion since the last election. Because Canadians don't change their minds unless something, like, really dramatic happens. For example, bungling COVID, Doug Ford bumbling COVID, right? Of course you're going to lose support from people if you do this kind of enormous, gratuitous sort of thing. And people are so, like, they don't really care what the media actually has to say about certain things. Like, the WE scandal is a great example of this. Like, people just generally assume, like, it's just being overwrought. Like, they don't really trust media outlets. And so they're just like, well, it doesn't really change the opinion, right? I'm not suddenly going to jump ship on the Liberals if I'm voting Liberals. Canadians change their opinion 6 weeks out from the election up to the election, right? There's this window of time here in Canada where if you voted Liberal and you answered the poll Liberal in the last election, then until about that 6 week window shows up, you're just going to answer that question Liberal and move on with your life, right? You're not going to spend a lot of time thinking about it because you got a life to live and capitalism is putting its boot on your face, right? You got your life to live. You just keep living your life. And so, but 6 weeks out, hey bud, how you doing? Thanks for popping in. Thanks for being here. And so 6 weeks out, that's when people will start to pick up a newspaper, right? That's when people will start to actually listen to people like me, right? That's when people will start to actually allow information to alter their mind, right? Because they know that there's a choice coming up. They know that there's a choice coming up. They know they haven't been paying attention, right? Like, they know. They're not gonna bullshit you about that. They know, right? And then they also know that now is an opportunity for them to actually have a larger sort of meta impact on what's going on. And then because of that 6 week window, then everybody around them starts to talk about it, and it becomes okay to have political conversations with the people around you. Corporate censorship rules are lifted a touch, right? Like, you're not allowed to talk politics in these corporate hierarchies or these it was you. I knew it was you, Minsky. You fella. What am I supposed to search about that? I lost the link you gave me because I'm a dummy. Can you give me that info back again? I want to bookmark it this time. And so because the restrictions on corporate censorship that exist in these tyrannical dictatorships we call businesses are loosened a little bit, we're allowed to kind of talk politics with one another and kind of get a better sense of what people are saying. And that's when people's minds are changed, right? The most dramatic example I can offer is here in Toronto during the mayoral election between Tory and Olivia Chow, right? Olivia Chow being the wife of Jack Layton. And the polling data was as clear as it could be, right? Like, Olivia Chow was here, John Tory was here, just like this, right? And they were going and they were going. 6 weeks out from the election, I think the key point was when Now Magazine, the lead editor of Now Magazine, published an open letter to Olivia Chow asking what her vision for Toronto was. And then Olivia Chow's response was, I don't think a politician should have a vision, which was the wrong decision because the poll numbers flipped. Literally flipped. And John Tory walked away with the election. And that happened like 6 weeks out from the election, right? And so Canadians only really tune into politics on a large scale about 6 weeks out. And the opinions can change, and they can change dramatically. Like the election between Mulcair, Trudeau, and Harper. Same exact story. The polling numbers were steady across the board for all of them. And then the debates started, right? 6 weeks out from the election, the debates started. And that's what changed the polls, and that's what shifted things about. And people swung towards the Liberals because Tom Mulcair came out as Raffi and was like, hey, everybody. Oh. Fucking idiot. Microtones by McDonald's, Rogers, et al. Are insidious. I don't think I know what you mean, Ward. Ruth, I'm the one in the crowd that tells the speaker that he hasn't answered the question, and why is it so difficult? Good for you, Ruth. Good for you, Ruth. And it's not difficult, it's just they don't want to. It's very simple. Because if they were to answer the question, like, they would either look like assholes or they would give the game up. I did an experiment. I typed the party platforms and labeled them by number and asked my coworkers to choose without knowing the party. And most people picked NDP. But when I told them, they would say, I have to vote Liberal to stop Conservatives. Yep. Classic. That's classic. Like that's like an ancient, since the inception of Canada, that's the classic model, right? Like that's starting to fray a little bit, but it's definitely the truth. Like when I was out on the East Coast, I was in Moncton for a bit. Everybody I talked to was an NDPer, right? Everybody was an NDPer. They just didn't know that their neighbors were also NDPers, right? And that's an important part of the conversation, is that you don't know what your neighbors are doing. You don't know, and in this environment, we don't talk to our neighbors. We barely know our neighbors anymore, right? We don't know what anybody else is doing, and we've been so isolated and separated, and so people go like, well, all they really have is polls, and so people are like, like. I want to vote NDP, but I know that my neighbor is going to vote Liberal, and I can't let the Conservatives get in. And it's a game, and it's a well-established game between the Conservatives and the Liberals. Like, they know what they're doing, they understand, and it's starting to fray a little bit, I think, because people are, and the trajectory across parliamentary democracies is to the left. Like, the Liberals are well aware that as this game falls apart, they lose power. Like, they know. You just need to take a look at what's going on across Europe, right? Like the traditional Conservatives and Liberals, like the Tories and the Labour Party and all that, throughout Europe, they're getting kicked out. Like, and not in small losses, like in big, overwhelming majorities. Like, in Germany, the classic Liberals and the Conservatives, they just don't have power anymore. They just have nothing. They've been completely decimated. They've been completely chased out. And the same is true in places like Spain. It's probably going to happen in France in this next election. And it's just very, like, it's happening all across Eastern Europe. It's very, very difficult for a political analysis to look at what's going on kind of on the global stage, as well as within the populace itself, and conclude that, like, oh yeah, Conservatives and Liberals will just have power forever, right? Like, if they keep doing this, if they keep selling us out to corporate power, we'll get rid of them. And they know it, right? The Economist is Steve Keen, and Minsky is the name of the open source modeling software. Thanks, bud. I'm going to look into that more. I knew it was Minsky. I tried to do a search for Minsky, but then I I knew it was going to be a bit of a dig, so I didn't want to bother. But Steve Keen is a good. I bet he's got a Wikipedia page. Yeah. Steve. Because I just think it's important to gamify. Steve Keen. It's important to gamify economics, and I'm surprised it's taken this long. Here, bookmark. Done. I'm just surprised it's taken this long to gamify economics. And I mean, there's a reason why they don't want to gamify economics, because if they were to gamify, like if you gamified trickle-down economics, you'd realize pretty fast that it collapses. Like, it doesn't take a genius to figure out that giving all the money to wealthy people to sit on and do nothing with is going to collapse your economy, right? Like, it doesn't. You don't need to be a brilliant PhD scholar to figure that one out. First bout of 30-degree heat could hit Toronto by the long weekend. No kidding. We're only in May. Okay, here we go. Global warming, that's not a thing. Okay. It is not anti-Semitic to be critical about a right-wing government in Israel. Yep. Pretty black and white. Trump radicalized me. Obama radicalized me. Mitch radicalized me. Nancy radicalized me. They all radicalized me because they reveal American politics is not about helping the people or planet. It's about keeping the people divided so the ruling class can continue to exploit us. Bingo. Bingo. And like, statements like this, right? Like, just like Twitter statements that circulate and get taken around and like, this statement, if taken as true by the reader, decimates decades of propaganda. Just collapses it to the earth. And even if you read it and you disagree with it, you have to acknowledge that here's a person in the world who, and this is getting like a bunch of upvotes and people are supporting it, like, you have to acknowledge that this exists. You can't pretend like it doesn't. So it's things are shifting. I'm very concerned that we're gonna have to go through a very scary period first, because that seems to be the only way that humans operate. Like, we genuinely actually do have to put the fork in the socket. Like, we it's not enough to have like an expert say like, no, there's electricity in there. There's an electrical line. If you put metal in there, it will electrocute you. I'm an expert. And then you've got a guy who's like, I installed the line. Like, then you've got the guy at the power department being like, yeah, that line connects to the power. Like, it creates electricity. If you put a metal socket in there, it'll electrocute you, right? You've got all of these voices telling you not to do it. You have a whole movement of people who are saying, don't put the fork in the electrical socket. And the guy with the fork in the electrical socket just goes, you know what? I've done my own research. It's just humans. We have to do it. We have to do it. It just seems to be the truth. And it's only after you put the fork in the socket that, and you see what happens, that you start to have conversations about like, well, maybe we shouldn't do that. Or maybe we should create a system where this outcome is not possible, right? Maybe we should put seatbelts in cars, right? But you can only have the put seatbelts in cars conversation after some people go through windshields, right? If you say it before it happens, people will be like, oh. And so I think we're going to have to do that. Like, I think that another Trump-style leader is going to have to happen in America. Like, and it's going to get, like, you think QAnon is crazy. You wait. Wait for the next group. They're just going to be nuts. Gamifying economics makes it fun and easy to learn and test theories, exactly what established economists don't want us to do. And even more importantly than that, allows us to understand how to interact with the system more effectively. They certainly don't want us to do that, right? And then even farther than that, they don't want us to understand how simple it actually is, right? Because it is actually quite simple. Like, it's not as complex as they pretend as though it is, right? It is actually quite simple. It's just that we haven't been taught it, and we don't, and we're explicitly disconnected from it on purpose. the population is not attuned to the mass marketing force of the internet just yet. Maybe the kids are. Yeah, we're still figuring the internet out, and we're not there yet. Like, the internet is still new. It's still very, very new, and and governments have not yet leveraged the power of the internet. Like, that's the one thing that I think we are going to face as a people very shortly, is that, like, our governments, even the American government, like even places like the CIA and all this, are still just on the emergent point. They're looking at the internet and they're just being like, oh, there's that. Well, what can that do? Like, how do we operate in that? And like, you do have like the CIA operating on like 4chan and sort of creating like that alt-right pipeline for people to be pipelined into like far-right fascist movements and things like this. Definitely the CIA is involved in that, but it's pretty low level, like, and so of course, because the internet is a technology that goes beyond our imagination. Like, it kind of has a life of its own in a way. Like, it just kind of lives as human imagination unfolding in front of us. Because of that, like, it's very difficult to predict what will happen, right? And because we live in such a highly individualized society, it would be very difficult for a Western culture to just like completely whitewash and censor the internet. We'll see. It's one of those things, right? We'll see. It's such a... I do know this, though, that like definitely the internet is starting to break into smaller and smaller compartments, right? Like something like YouTube, right? YouTube used to just be more like the internet, like everybody had their own webpage and all this kind of stuff. Whereas now YouTube is like a large part of it. Same thing with Facebook, right? That instead of it just being sort of like a wild west of crazy individualized nonsense, there's like a website that hosts this. And it makes sense that such a hosting thing would happen, but we're also struggling with like, well, what does that mean in terms of like regulation? What does that mean in terms, like, you can't just say or do anything on the internet. Like, we all agree with that. Like, I can't just distribute child pornography on the internet, right? Like, that's not going to happen. So it's an unfolding thing. It's quite exciting to watch. I just hope that we don't, like, I just hope that the socialists and the communists don't get McCarthy'd, right? I suspect it'll happen. It'll there'll be a moment where just like, if you're a socialist or a communist, you'll just be deplatformed. Because communism, right? Did you see the BBC journalist get owned on human rights? I think it's a few years old. I did not. Well, guys, I'm gonna shut this one down. Thanks so much for coming out. Thanks so much for being here. Thanks so much for listening to the music. Sorry about the internet blip. I can't control that. I guess my music's just too powerful. Yeah. Thanks for coming, guys. I'll see you tomorrow. Good luck. We're gonna need it.